When I purchased my very first home, it unknowingly was covered in mold. Like nothing was visible. I couldn't believe anyone lived in that home. The off-gassing and the formaldehyde and the humidity. You want to be able to control it, but you want to be in control.
My vision for eradicating CIRS is to really remind everyone it's the building standard. But it is intense how many new construction, brand new buildings have sewer gas leaks, which will literally shrink the outer cortex of your brain. All right, I have a very special guest today. Her Instagram handle is holistichomes.by.Christine, and I highly recommend you follow her because she is the real deal Holyfield when it comes to building honest, clean, well-designed, water damage building preventative homes. And I just want to say hello to my friend Christine Cimabue, who's also going to be at CIRS. And we're going to have a very enticing down and dirty with the buildings conversation. What's up, Christine?
Hi. So excited to have this conversation. It's going to be a good one.
So before we got on today, we were talking briefly about Dr. Shoemaker and how he called out Pfiesteria, this biotoxin in Chesapeake Bay in 1996, and then went up against the EPA and the governor of Maryland and got whitewashed on his work, Pfiesteria illness syndrome. They allowed him to rename it possible estuary associated illness because possible means you can't, you can always have that little legal loophole in court. And you were sharing that you learned the majority of what you do in construction practices through construction defect. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background, who you are, how you got into this, and how boots on the ground construction defect was really the ultimate way to learn how to do things better?
Yeah. Real life, real world experience is far better than a classroom. But my construction background began over a decade ago. I worked for a lot of luxury builders and started to see why isn't anyone asking these questions? And homeowners nowhere to be found, fully entrusting in the contractor. And I had a lot of questions and paired that with when I purchased my very first home in 2012. It unknowingly was covered in mold. Like nothing was visible. I had the inspection. I thought I was doing everything right, but I couldn't believe anyone lived in that home. There was so much mold in the kitchen. And that's when I just put all the pieces together. We need to go above and beyond, build better homes. People need to be safe in their homes. And so that's what started the journey of putting all the pieces together. And over the years, I've seen what works really well, what leads to failures, and everything in between, and how ruthless different climates can be.
Mm. And you're in the OC in California. And what I've discovered out there when you're working with that climate and patients in that climate is everyone thinks it's like dry California. But when patients send in their humidity readers, it's like 60 to 80% humidity in a lot of the coastal regions. What's your
Mhm.
approach to dealing with building in humidity above 50%?
Really, California, although has some of the strictest building code regulations, just from a seismic standpoint, one thing that often doesn't get thought about is really building codes are the bare minimum building code standards, and really in California specifically, focus on structural integrity and seismic requirements, as well as we love our energy efficiency. Those are the two big players, but there's nothing that's prioritizing occupant health and indoor air quality. And so, although we do have certain regions that are more coastal and do have really high humidity, there's not enough attention, according to just building code, on the air barrier. There's not enough actually separating our interior space from what's happening at the exterior of the home.
So Will Spates, rest in peace, who's no longer with us, he really was the first one to teach me build tight and ventilate right.
Mm.
And I know you and Bill Weber are throwing down an awesome talk at CIRS on June 26th to the 28th in Fort Lauderdale in a new construction Omni that we hope is
Yes.
built better. And Boulder County shares a lot of that hippie environmental aspiration of environmental efficiency. And I'm all about it if you do it right. Right. But when we bought our 1966 Boulder, Colorado home, which was my 41 isolated water damage experience home, like this good environmental guy who wanted to save money on heating and cooling and not put out so many fossil fuel emissions, we blew R40 into the attic. We put double heat mirror windows on, and we did not have a traditional HVAC. We had piped hot water heat. So
Mm.
I had the guy before I knew it, we're all mold illiterate, right? Like we all are born not knowing how to build a home and not knowing how to maintain a home. And then there's these geniuses like Christine and Joel Steebrook, who's going to be our keynote, the godfather of building science, who will teach you how to build a wall properly and teach you how to
Yes.
ventilate. So I had the guy come over for the tax credit, and he did the blower door just to see if I improved efficiency on heating and cooling. And this dude was awesome. And he's one of those old school guys. He's like, do not button up this building one iota more. And I said, what are you talking about, button up? And basically the home didn't breathe at all. I built a toxic soup, right? So
Mm.
if someone's cooking gluten-free pasta, and the cooktop stove isn't enough, all that humidity would build up. If you took a
Mhm.
shower and you didn't have perfect exhaust fan, all that humidity built up. If you bought a desk from Target and unpacked it, all those toxins and formaldehyde would not turn over in the house. So, what's your approach to build tight, ventilate right in a climate that has 50% humidity or higher that we know will promote aspergillus, because there's enough moisture in that air to feed that mold some good drink.
Mm-hmm. We got to do some myth busting
Okay.
about the idea. We've probably all heard somebody say that the home needs to breathe. That's why the 1950s, 60s home with little to no insulation was doing so much better than the homes that are built today. There's a couple things to address that sometimes terms get used interchangeably. So, Joe Steebrook, he talks a lot about the control layers of the home. So when we talk about does a home need to breathe? Well, there's a couple things. One, we need to control the air, an air barrier for the home. We also need to control vapor moving through the wall, and control what's referred to as bulk water or like rainwater, water from a hose, anything. So water, and then fourth is going to be thermal. So that's your insulation, then how well insulated the home is. So when we talk about does a home need to breathe, the answer is no, not from an air standpoint. But does a home need to breathe from a vapor permeability standpoint? In certain climates, most often, yes. Now, it gets a little bit more nuance in if there's vapor drive and how is the assembly drying, but just like our bodies, we don't breathe through our skin. We have one centralized intake and outtake or exhaust of air. If you are not controlling the air that is coming into your home, meaning if you have no air barrier, like a typical 1950s home, you are going to be bringing in air all throughout your walls, through your attic. You have no control over it. So you're going to be bringing in that humid air. Here in California, if it's wildfire season, you're going to be bringing in that smoke damage through the walls, which occurred when those fires happened in 2025. So being able to control your indoor air quality, just like what you mentioned, the off-gassing and the formaldehyde and the humidity. You want to be able to control it, but you want to be in control. You don't want to be willy-nilly be bringing it in all throughout your exterior wall layers.
So in that 1966 house, our transient solution was to put in an ERV,
Hmm.
and it actually really helped unless the wildfires were going. And then you had to turn that off because an ERV is going to condition your air with bringing some outside air in, right? So I really appreciate you talking about, yes, if a wall gets wet and you're a 1950s home and you don't have any insulation and there's wind, things are going to dry out a little bit better. But if you're near a highway, all those diesel fumes are going to come through, right? All that fire smoke is going to come through. So can you give us some basic definition on those four layers of the wall just for our listeners and realize we're not in a Joseph Stiebrook lecture like we're going to be at Survex?
Yes. The simplified version is
Yeah.
that those four control layers, you should be in control of them, how open or tight they are. And there's implications to what you're choosing. Just like if on a basic level, when you think about insulation, there's implications if your home has a 2x4 exterior wall, you're only going to get so much insulation and so much thermal comfort. But if you're doing a new construction home and you have 2x6 walls and you have insulation there, plus insulation at the exterior of the home, you are now in control of having a much more comfortable thermal envelope or enclosure, rather. So, and that does correlate, yes, to energy efficiency and how much you need on the heating and cooling side of things. Um, then from there, looking at vapor control, we want to be in control of the vapor as well. And depending on the climate, um, you may be susceptible to some vapor drive. But overall, vapor, as the gas form of water, is moving throughout the building enclosure. Yes, but if there is a vapor retarder or a vapor membrane that is not vapor open at all, that can be okay, but you need to know that no vapor is passing through that. So depending on where that layer is, you may be trapping moisture, you may be limiting the drying potential of walls, and 1950s homes had no vapor control or very little, and so it was completely vapor open. So that's one aspect. Then on the air control side, this is one that is just good practice. Having air control layers everywhere because air brings a whole lot of moisture with it. So if you're in Texas or you're in Florida or you're in a coastal climate, your air is bringing a lot of moisture with it. Also, contaminants. A good example that happens quite a bit is in crawl spaces. So if there is an older home that has a ventilated crawl space, there is likely no sort of air sealing from that crawl space to the interior part of your home, the interior living space. And I've had some clients that had I won't know the name exactly, but there was some contaminants found in soil that were then found within their blood work. You know this space a whole lot better than I do. But they were baffled as to how is that possible? How is that showing up in my reports? You know, the soil is not within my home. Well, there's no air sealing, and so the stacking effect can definitely happen there. And then the last one is controlling water, bulk water, which we all know is good practice. We do not want water infiltrating into our homes for any reason.
Okay, so I want to summarize that a little bit for our listeners. Let's start from the last one and move backwards.
Okay.
Um, you go to Switzerland or Kitzbühel or Innsbruck, and you look at how they build roofs when they get 4 feet and 5 feet of snow, and the roofs have a 5 foot overhang. So right
Hmm.
there, I'm already going to have water, snow, if it slides off, it's going to fall 5 feet away from my foundation wall, right? We talk to people about running gutters 5 feet away from the home to take water to a place that's going to run away from the home, right? It's even biblical to say, build your house on bedrock, right? And they're talking about metaphorically for things like your marriage or relationships, your parenting, but they're also talking about water should run away, right? And I'm the first guy to tell you when I was going to see you Boulder, man, did I want a house on the Boulder Creek because you just go out your door and go tubing, right? But that's the worst place to build a house because that Boulder Creek doesn't have a pool barrier and that river is constantly kicking moisture out, right? There was a
Hmm.
patient I remember from the Midwest. They were 2 miles from the Mississippi and they always had water in their basement, right? That soil just spreads, right? So we want to take water away from the house in the bulk water, right?
Yeah.
Now you're saying it what stays in what happens in Vegas should stay in Vegas. What happens in the crawl space should stay in the crawl space, right? And what happens in the wall cavity should stay in the wall cavity. And what happens in the attic should stay in the attic, right? We should not translate these spaces into conditioned air where we're living and breathing. Would you agree?
Yes, and I have a question for you because this is what I find quite often with existing homes. Some of the worst cases are homes that have an older crawl space, so a ventilated crawl space and a ventilated attic. That's a very conventional way of building an attic. So from what I've found in these older homes is they are just pummeled on all sides with constant outdoor air infiltration because a ventilated attic, that air within that attic is outdoor air that's supposed to be constantly moving and ventilating. And same thing with the crawl space. Most of the time, these two areas, the attic and the crawl space, are insufficiently ventilated. And maybe the crawl space is dark and wet and has its own ecology. But that's what I found in conventional homes. Now, if we were to do like a new construction home, it would not have a ventilated crawl space or attic.
Yeah, so I think this comes to talking about positive pressure and negative pressure, right?
Hmm.
So, and what's so we were talking before the pod just about the vision, my vision for eradicating CRS and the vision of CIRS X is to really remind everyone it's the building, stupid. It's the
Hmm.
building, it's the building, it's the building. You can take all the anti-inflammatories you want, you can do all the peptides you want, and they will all take the edge off and take you from an F to a C plus and maybe make you more functional. But if you have CRS, you have to do step one of the CIRS Shoemaker protocol, which is remove patient from biotoxin exposure. And that's why when you hear me MC at the conference, I might point you out and tell the world you are my healthcare hero. Because if you don't build my patients better buildings, we are just fiddling our thumbs on step 2 through 12 of the Shoemaker protocol. It's the building, it's the building, it's the building. And in naturopathic medicine, that's called remove obstacle to cure, which is also known as identify and treat the underlying causes, right? So if I'm kicking you in the shins and I rub a little arnica on your shin, you go, oh, it feels a little better. And I'm going to say, here's some Advil. And you go, oh, it feels a little better, but I still have 6 out of 10 pain. If I stop kicking you in the shins, you can stop feeling the pain. It's the building, stupid, right?
Hmm.
And so we have two things we need to do. We need to create remediation companies that can go in and do medical grade remediation, right? We were talking before the call how MedViro is one of the companies that is dedicated to medical grade remediation, right? But they're only going to execute the homework assignment of what a Bill Weber or an Anna Branch write, right? So they're just
Yeah.
responsible for that, right? But Osmond's talk at CIRS X is going to be, what do I do when I'm a remediator? I know there's more that needs to be done here, but the inspector didn't write the homework assignment deep enough to help this family graduate, right? When it's
Mm.
Anna Branch, we don't got to worry about it. Was Bill Weber? We don't got to worry about it. And Bill has done the most testimonies on medical cases, right? And Dr. Shoemaker used to always say, if you want to know your stuff, present in court, right? You will know
Hmm.
quickly where your weak spots are, right? But we got to do high quality remediation, a lot of retrofit. And that's probably where I have a little more experience than you because I just run these retrofitting. How do we fix these 1966 buildings, right? But then there's the Christine Cimabues of the world. And that's the whole reason we want to do the podcast is to say, and then we have to build better buildings, right? So we're going to try and fix the old ones. But if we're going to put money and resources into building something, let's build it right, right?
Yes.
So with the retrofit, to circle back around, you might have to create negative pressure that pulls conditioned in your house air into the crawl space, right? And pull that air in there. But if that fan is too strong for John Banta, now you're going to be
Hmm.
pulling wall cavity air through your
Hmm.
outlets into the house, right? And Cindy Edwards in the medically important remediation course, I got to oversee, like watch those guys argue about all these physics points. And she would talk about that even happens when you turn on your dryer. That happens when you turn on your cooktop stove, right? That happens when you put on your exhaust fan. So one of the things we have to do is per what you're saying is balance that HVAC so that there's a slight positive pressure on the conditioned air and air is slightly moving outward. So if I have a big giant manure pile 2 blocks down and I open the front door, my indoor air is going out, the manure isn't coming in, right? My crawl space air isn't coming in, my indoor air is going slightly into the crawl space, right? My on a hot California day, the air is going to expand in my attic, and I don't want it pressing down through my sconce. I want those sealed, and I want just a little bit of positive pressure going up, right? And then they can't, hot and cold can't meet too hard because then we're gonna have condensation, right?
Yes. So
So
positive
these,
pressure, it can be an issue in certain climates, especially
yes,
colder climates, but it is just like what you're saying, a delicate balance.
yes. And I would say the biggest thing we see on the retrofits is we finally have found some people who are studying the HVAC. I love Darren Eckes and Rafi of Safe Air Pros that they're helping a lot of our patients do that. But it's a whole math on airflow and how strong you should run your HVAC, and then also like a 12 uh, inch goes into a 10 inch goes into an 8 inch to make sure that that room over there is still getting conditioned for cooling and heating, but it's not pulling so hard. So I'll never forget that Will Spates talked about this for Florida. He had to build these machines that now they have whole house dehumidifiers, but he would basically pull in Florida air. He would dehumidify it, scrub it for
Mhm.
microbial growth because aspergillus grows in high counts in Florida, right? And then he would have to slightly positive pressure the house so the drywall wouldn't be moist enough to grow microbial growth. And then he would have his clients have bookshelves and couches 2 inches off the wall because if they were right against the wall, you'd pull them out 6 months later and there'd be microbial growth on that couch, right?
Mm.
So tell us about, we know that that's a lot to think about for remediation, but we're here today to talk about let's build better buildings. Tell us about when you're building something for a client, what's your process for HVAC, airflow, crawl spaces? What if someone gets a chance to do it right on a new construction build?
It's my favorite opportunity to like
Okay.
really dial it in. This is the best opportunity to build a healthy home. Renovations to me are far more challenging than being able to do a new build because there's certain things about those homes we can't change, like the foundation. A lot of homes in California have concrete slabs that have no vapor barrier beneath them. And so those are just really challenging things to change about an existing home. But in a new build setting, when we're either the builder here in California or if we're consulting on a new build, anywhere else in the US, we are able to strategize and collaborate with the architect directly. So something that's really important for any homeowner to know is that those architectural plans are your contract. That is what you are telling the builder to build. I can't tell you how many plans I have seen just this year that reflect spray foam insulation. And during construction, the homeowner would reach out to me and say, well, I don't want spray foam insulation. What can I do? And the truth is, particularly for spray foam, it is not a one-to-one swap for any other building material. So it's not just simply, let's swap it out for sheep's wool insulation. It has completely different performance. Um, so being able to walk through the entire building enclosure and talk about what is the target air tightness of this home, because it's a whole system that however airtight it's going to be, that gets communicated over to the mechanical designer saying, here's what we're building. Here's what's the exterior walls. Here's the performance data for the windows. We're doing a fully conditioned attic. Now, design the whole mechanical system. And our approach is the mechanical systems should never be an afterthought. That should never be something that's walked through during construction and like, oh, we'll just figure it out. No way, no how. We bring in the mechanical designer right when the floor plan is finished. The reason is because we want the mechanical plan to have priority. We want the ductwork, how big we need it to be. We want sufficient mechanical closets so we have equipment. We want them to come first. And then mechanical plan starts talking to the structural plan and see if there's any clashes, because that also happens during construction of like, well, we got a big structural piece right here. Guess you're going to have to move that ductwork. And we just don't want that. Again, we want mechanicals come first. And so structural and mechanical, they need to be talking to each other. We just need to get it all dialed in when we're prioritizing occupant health. That is first. So,
It's the lungs, right?
yeah,
You're kind of toast without your
yeah.
lungs.
The
So,
lungs of the home, the filtration and managing the humidity, like, is so important.
so on your IG handle, one of the things you say is helping families design and build mold safe homes, and one of your most probably utilized um, posts that you have pinned on the top is the directory is here, comment search. And we were talking about how we're trying to get remediation companies who are willing to do medical grade remediation. Can you tell us about your directory and how you're trying to find at least a starting point for patients to vet builders and architects and so on and so forth?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because your build is only as great as your team. And the truth is, healthy homes don't happen. If you leave it in the hands of building code minimums and the architect that your neighbor used because it was a really pretty house and the contractor who said he's available, healthy homes don't, at this point, just come naturally. So you really have to be committed and willing to building a team that understands the vision and the priorities. So, yes, we build here in Orange County and we consult on projects, but we still need that builder piece. And so we put together a national directory of architects, builders, and some independent home inspectors to help that process along. It's going to be not a slam dunk always, but it at least gets the conversation flowing. And so one of my favorite questions to ask builders is, how do you treat moldy lumber? You're going to get a very big lumber package if you're doing a stick frame home. And what happens if some of the lumber does have fungal growth or something visible on it? Is that builder going to tell you, oh, that's harmless, don't worry about that, that's lumberyard mold, you can't avoid it, this is Texas, it's on everything? Or are you going to get a response from that builder of like, no problem. We can sort, we can select, we can reject lumber. Are they willing to work with some of your requests?
So we were talking about my friend here who does a little bit of oversight on builder plans. Brian Tinker was telling me about. He took the trip to, is it Pacific Sierra, the big wood company,
Sierra Pacific?
Sierra Pacific, and he was
Mhm.
sharing that the plant was impressive. And I share this because I always blamed Sierra Pacific in my head as the problem. And he said in their warehouse, they had 200 sensors in the kiln. So they dry their wood, right?
Mhm.
And then they package it with a vapor barrier that breathes outward, but moisture is not allowed in. And he was sharing that the bigger problem is with transport. So if someone punctures that package with a forklift,
Yeah.
that's the pack of wood that you're going to see all that lumberyard mold on, right? And I found
Mhm.
that fascinating because when you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you look, there's like a couple that look really clean, and then there's one that's wrecked, right, in regards to that stick and frame. So what do you expect on a builder that you're working with if they open up a pack and it's wrecked?
Mm.
Like what's the integrity play there, right? Do they is it Amazon? You just take it to Whole Foods and send it back and get a full refund? Do they eat it? Do they make a moldy bonfire at the local pep rally? Like, what's your expectation when you're overseeing a project?
Mm. So, really, a successful project needs two phases. The phase one is definitely strategy. Like, how are we going to build this? Everyone's on the same page. And in that phase one is where expectations are communicated in written form, in
Mhm.
some form of formal document. That is where moldy lumber is discussed. That is where inclement weather is discussed. So if a big rainstorm comes through, what is the expectation? Are we shot vacuuming water? Are we what like how are we shedding water off of any of the framing? So we got to lay that groundwork. Phase two really happens during construction. During construction is a very frustrating time for the homeowner and for everyone involved.
Mm.
It shouldn't be. You are paying a lot of money to be very stressed out and frustrated, and that should change. And you should definitely not feel like you're being gaslit by by your team. Like you are paying for a service and paying for a home. You should, in my opinion, get everything you want. And
Or at least
so
everything that was in the contract.
everything that was in the contract, yes, and that you communicated and the builder gave you the cost for it, you agreed to it, like things should run fairly smoothly. Things change and there's always some sort of change orders, but when it comes to framing, we typically like to see a pre-construction meeting. If the homeowner can be present and say, this type of piece, this type of lumber, I want this rejected. Anything that looks like this, reject it. And if that has been communicated prior to the lumber yard and to the whole process, there isn't typically resistance if it's been communicated. But one of my favorite things to do that I pretty much make mandatory on every project is additional inspections.
Mhm.
It's quite wild.
Independent,
Yes, completely independent.
not
So you've
not
got
a
your builder.
Tommy, not builder Tommy's cousin.
No. Now, the builder's going to have their own quality control. That's wonderful. The architect might even be showing up on site doing some
Or
construction admin.
city
Yeah,
planner might come, right?
you're going to
He's
have that.
not mold literate or
Yeah,
city
the city
literate,
inspector is going to be there.
right?
But that city inspector, again, is just looking at building code minimums. They are not looking at anything related to indoor air quality and
And
your
much more
health.
structural than water damage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They could show up to a job site that was completely rained on and, still get a pre-installation inspection pass. They would be, for the most part, totally fine with you closing up those walls. And so independent inspections are huge in building a healthy home. And it's a good thing for everyone involved. Builders should love to have that peace of mind as well as homeowners. And so a part of the new build process, once framing and windows and everything happens, should be a mold inspection.
Well, I've learned in my life that men are very good at planning. Is that is that something you've experienced?
Um, if they are given enough advance notice, they can make anything happen.
Yeah.
In construction, there's a lot of focus on timelines and schedules, and it's a delicate dance of all the subcontractors. But laying expectations early and communicating, hey, we are going to be doing a mold inspection after 100% of framing is complete and windows are in, and no more rainstorms are going to be damaging the interior. But that again can give peace of mind to somebody who's concerned about mold in the new home, because new homes do not come mold free on their own.
Well, the other thing I like about the independent inspectors is it takes some pressure off the patient or the client who might be in CIRS and not be feeling well, who's stressed out and overall and anxious, where you're giving that responsibility to be the pain in the keister and the needler and the squeaky wheel to that independent inspector. And then the only problem is, do you have a shark like a good lawyer, right? You need an inspector who's not going to shuck it up with the boys, right?
Mm.
When we did when I got to oversee and support the medically important remediation course, right? It was Greg Weatherman, Bill Weber, Mike Schrantz, John Banta, and Cindy Edwards. And this might sound stupid because it's Captain Obvious, but I left that experience with learning so many things. But every time Cindy would lay back, Cindy Edwards, and then she would chime in with this like straight to the jugular truth bomb, right? And it made me think we just need more women in regulation. We need more women in planning. We need more women in inspection. We need more women in the environmental professional portion of construction practices. And it's like any gender should do what they want and dream and what they're into. But there's just something about the bro effect that I see sometimes, and incestual building phenomenon where like it's my friend's cousin that we golf with who's the builder. So now as the architect, I can't call them out because in Podunk, Timbuktu, we have a friendship.
Hmm.
Do you run into this ever where there's just not enough independent objectivity in these relationships and these teams where or are you just magically finding these people who are not yes men or yes women and they will call each other out when their integrity is slipping on the construction practices?
Mm. I've spent a lot of hours assembling everyone that is needed to build anywhere in the US. One of the most frustrating parts of that process, finding independent inspections. And really, if we were to just like give a Cliff Notes version of everything, is that there is a very big industry dedicated to building defects, destructive testing, construction litigation. There is an entire industry for what happens after the building fails.
Mm-hmm.
That entire industry needs to come proactively to the front of construction. So
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what I did. I reached out nationally to all of the hygrothermal analysis, the leak testing. I was told no so much when I would share we are doing a residential project. This is custom. This is not a production build. We want to be proactive and we want to leak test the windows, not after they fail, but right when they're installed. We want to do X, Y, and Z. And I was told no by so many companies. And I would say,
Mm-hmm.
well, but tell me why. I want to know why. And they would just tell me we only do, post just post failed projects, or it was commercial only. But I found,
Sounds a little bit like the like big pharma playbook, honestly.
uh, Well,
just push out the drug, and if there's any litigation, we already made 10 bill, so we'll just write it off as a 2 bill legal
yeah,
fee.
I didn't like that answer.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So, yeah. So we were able to find experts in leak testing and in hydrothermal analysis because that's a big part of what we do as well. We'll come up with a great strategy, but
Mm,
still, just like in your practice, you have to have data. You have to know if something's working, and you get blood work, and then you follow up, and there has to be testing. There's
yep,
no sort of diagnostic or any sort of testing until something has failed. So
yep. We
I don't
had a
like that.
great conversation with Dr. Shoemaker this morning, and one of the things that we're on the same page with, and we're building the evidence and the data sets to prove it, is endotoxin or sewer gas makes mold look like a baby. And
Oh,
mold is no baby. So we are having our patients, if they're purchasing an asset, whether it's being able to do something custom with you, which is the ideal way to go, right?
mm-hmm.
Not everyone is there financially. If they're buying a ticky tacky slapped up home, they have to do a plumber smoke test now as part of the inspection if they have CIRS, right? And
Okay.
then there's a whole art form to that, right? It's like the non-toxic smoke pellets. You have to stress the pipes enough. California doesn't do Studer vents, so they'll have sometimes 6, 7 sewer vents on the roof, and you have to cap off 2 or 3 or 4 of those so you get pressure to build up. But it is intense how many new construction, brand new buildings have sewer gas leak and then
Mm.
can trigger CIRS endotoxin, which will literally shrink the outer cortex of your brain. If you cut a Twinkie in half, the outer yellow cake shrinks, and 3+ nuclear atrophy, and you only have 11 in the brain. So,
Wow.
and it is violently brain atrophying. And that's why Mike Trance and I gave that talk in 2024 in Frisco on sewer gas, and we split it where he talked about how to work through a home on that. And then the other thing that happens is sometimes new builds, once you get the plumbing going, the P traps dry out. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not even that the plumbing isn't installed right. It's you have to have someone once a week, especially in places like Colorado or Arizona or New Mexico or Utah, fill those P traps, or you're just going to be smelling neighbor Johnny's poopy through the city sewer right through your P trap. Right. So I couldn't agree with you more. But the two that I just see all the time is stress testing those windows before everything's buttoned up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then plumber smoke test. So you're not in there going, it's mold free, but everyone's sick anyway. Well, you have a sewer leak, right? And you mentioned construction defect, right? Like, why wouldn't you front load that money to make sure you build things right with checks and balances to avoid the legal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite person for construction defect for testimony is Bill Weber, our good mutual
Yes.
friend, right? And that is who you're speaking at CIRS with this year. You guys are doing a co-talk. An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of mold. Can you
Yes.
give our listeners a little bit of a prelude of what you're trying to accomplish with that talk? Is this the conversation?
Yes. So when Bill and I got together, he's wonderful and has so much knowledge in the case study space. And he sees so much building defect and everything that he sees. And then me sharing my frustration of like, why isn't anyone being proactive about this? Like if we don't start getting proactive about the way that we're building, we're never going to get ourselves out of this mold remediation mess. It's just going to be a big upswing of mold remediations. Um, and so that's where we kind of got our minds together of him sharing, case studies of what he's finding, and then I'm sharing my proactive approach, how this could have been avoided and how you can avoid it. And really that is I just want everyone to really feel informed about what's happening in their home. And if they're going to be building, I don't want anyone feeling like mid construction, oh, I have spray foam, but they're telling me I have to use this. you're paying so much money for your home. You shouldn't feel like you're cornered into a material that you might not thrive in. So
Can spray foam ever work?
depends on who you ask.
Hmm.
And I have some strong opinions about it because it's it's not mandated. You can use other materials. It takes a different strategy, definitely, but spray foam isn't something that can easily be removed. So
Right.
a quick thought is that in 30, 40 years, when these homes are getting renovated or additions, I don't think that we are going to be renovating a lot of these spray foam homes. I think they will need to be demolished.
Yeah.
Because the 1950s homes, you can renovate those. You could still, work with those. But when you have spray foam in all of the wall cavities, that does not come out. It needs to be remediated out.
Right. It has a little bit of the old asbestos vibe on removal. It's just kind of like it breaks and yeah. So what's your favorite insulation? Are you rock wool? Are you sheep? Are you
Mm. I I do have some great products I love, and I'm always insistent on every home should be tailored to the unique health challenges or goals to that individual. I really dislike building homes for an unknown end user.
Mhm.
Like, we don't
So let
know.
me give you an example. Mrs. Smith has full-blown CIRS, water damage
Yes.
building, and she also has multiple chemical sensitivity. What
Okay.
what would be your insulation of choice?
Insulation of choice there is most likely going to end up being a sheep's wool
Mm.
because that naturally does not have formaldehyde. Now, a very popular mineral wool insulation does still contain about a 5% formaldehyde additive.
Okay.
And so that kind of goes to the spectrum of like, how non-toxic do we need to get?
Right.
Something like insulation, something we do with all of our clients is that a material that has that much impact on indoor air quality by volume, because it's just going in every exterior wall, materials need to be vetted.
Mm.
Every material. I've had clients very chemically sensitive, but their child had a severe pet dander allergy.
Mm.
Sheep's wool was not the right choice for them.
Mm.
Um,
Out
in
of curiosity, what'd you use on that? What was your second best?
I believe on that one we ended up going with a mineral wool. There is also it's called Timber HP. It's a wood fiber insulation,
Mhm.
but with extreme chemical sensitivities, I want them breathing, smelling, living with it. Like they should be able to live with it because again, we don't want them moving into the home to then find out after the fact of like, oh shoot, I'm
So could
reacting to
you
this.
could you put some sheep wool on the dining room table and have little Sally do her homework there for a couple weeks and see if she reacts or not, and have the EpiPen uh,
Yeah, we
close?
we typically have them put it in their bedroom, like on the
Mhm.
nightstand, somewhere where
Right.
they're sleeping. Now, this is, we're trying to simulate something that isn't
Sure.
necessarily real life because in most construction applications, the drywall is not acting as an air barrier. It's not completely airtight. So what goes behind the drywall does matter. If
Right.
the drywall were airtight, then in theory, what's happening, if there's fungal growth behind it, it wouldn't be impacting the
Right.
interior space. So it
And
really does
and
matter.
and the bellowing effect is real, right? Homes get hot and the air in the wall cavity expands, and then they get cold. Napa is probably one of the most extreme places for that. And John and others have talked about putting outlet covers in where you have those little rubber membranes that you can put behind the
Yeah.
outlets, so when the wall swells, that air cavity doesn't penetrate into your conditioned air as much. I think that's great. So, a couple things we talked about maybe hitting our listeners with are your top three most concerning building materials. And I would
Hmm.
love to get your thoughts on oriented strand board or the OSB.
Emphasis on the B because
Yeah.
it's just bad.
Oh, I thought you say PS.
The PG version is
The
it's
PG version is
bad.
bad. Yeah.
Um, OSB is most commonly used as like a roof sheathing or like an exterior wall sheathing, and it's really cheap. So that's why it's got a prominent stake in new construction today. But something aside from it being terrible material when it gets wet, it just is turns to mush. It also has some vapor permeability issues. So plywood kind of turns into like a smart plywood in that it gets a little bit more vapor tight and vapor open when it's warm. It has much more dynamic vapor permeability where OSB does not. It stays relatively more vapor closed. And so it's just kind of a hodgepodge of issues. So if I had a choice, I would go plywood instead of OSB.
Uh, Joseph Seabrook, he's from Canada, right? And he,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because when we were out visiting film schools with my older son, I saw they were building with beautiful plywood.
Oh.
And what I heard locally, I don't know if this is true or not, but in BC they went to OSB, and then all those buildings got moldy, and then they went back to plywood, is my
Mm,
understanding. But when we were out there, there was these new apartment buildings going up, and it was all beautiful, real plywood. And
great.
and I don't think people realize how much sturdier of a material that is than, well, I call OSB sponge board, right?
Yeah.
You're screwing sponges onto your two by fours.
And a sister to OSB, if we continue down the list of terrible building materials,
Hmm.
is MDF baseboards and casework.
Hmm.
They belong nowhere in anyone's home.
So can you define that for our listeners?
Yeah, so if you were to go to a big box hardware retailer, MDF baseboards is what's on the shelves. And it is a medium density fiber board. It's just a bunch of little wood compressed together. And if you've ever been in like a rental or a bathroom or a vacation home and you've seen baseboards next to a standing shower, it's likely that those baseboards are a little bubbly, a little warped, a little soft. And those are probably MDF baseboards.
Hmm.
Again, another material that was never used in construction 50, 60 years ago. It was always solid wood baseboards. So I don't love mopping or steam cleaning or spills. And we have the most vulnerable building material right there at the floor.
So like for our listeners, for me it looks like they just took sawdust, that like ultrafine sawdust, and pressed it together with
Mm.
glue, and has a really kind of unique chemical smell to it. would,
Mm-hmm.
would you say? And
Yeah.
and in my old house, one of the things they recommended is just painting wasn't PVC, but it was almost like a plastic baseboard. And what's your thoughts on that? Because I thought that was a better idea. But from a toxicity standpoint, maybe not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It from a toxicity standpoint, I don't love doing that. Um, Solid wood performs really well.
Mm,
You know, it's clean, dry lumber performs really well.
yep.
And so solid wood, I do really like that. Now, when we come to like laundries and bathrooms and, moisture prone areas, those areas should ideally have stone baseboards to
Mm,
handle that type of moisture.
yep.
And so there's alternative materials. Yes, there's cost implications with doing anything other than what conventional building is using, but
I think
longevity.
sometimes people, and again, I understand there's levels to finances, and it's a rough time right now for people, and the economy is wild. But we went through a $200,000 remediation remodel with 41 isolated water damage experience. And the biggest mistake I made on that house is, if I could do it over again, I would have just paid 30K to demo everything. then have someone spot remediate. Oh, there's microbial growth, and then I would have aerosolvered. But I have to say, like, I did a lot of baseboard out of tile that I picked up at EcoCycle, which is reclaimed building materials, and then I just washed the tile from a mold factor, and then we installed tile in places like the bathroom where the humidity was getting higher as tile. You think that's a reasonable approach to kind of go Etsy arts and crafty on the
Yeah.
situation? Yeah.
I I've even done like one kind of chain store is Floor and Decor. Floor and
Oh,
Decor, you can
great
get
products for a price. Yeah.
just right off of the shelf, you can get, they refer to it as a shower curb. So they use
Yeah.
it, it's like 6 inches for a shower curb. You could get that,
Yeah.
have the tile guy cut it, and that's a baseboard. And it you can get solid, you can get marble, they have it made out of glass, and so
Yeah.
they've got a lot of options. So you can get creative on what materials are used, but ultimately looking at materials through like a robust water resistant type of lens instead of, what the builder might just typically use all the time.
Yeah, basements aren't ideal, but they still happen, right?
Yeah.
And John Banta was the first person to tell me that it can take over a year to cure a concrete slab, right? So we just pour that in these ticky-tacky houses, and then we put luxury vinyl plank over
Mm.
it and trap moisture, and then our remediation companies come in and lift up the board, and it's full of microbial growth, right? So Floor and Decor is one of those places where they have plank tile that looks like wood floors, but it's tile and it's still breathable. It's just an extension of your concrete slab. So we,
Hmm.
we always tell people either semi-permeable polished concrete or tile on there. And there's some ways you can do like wood floor looking tile. There's and it's very cost effective, right? And then what we do, which is, a not so CIRS family with an Austrian work ethic, is I'm going to I'm going to damp wipe with a microfiber every single plank tile before it goes into that basement outside, right? So we're going to open up every box, and I usually pay my son a youthful wage to do that, you know, and show him some good work ethic. I got one more building material question that came up the other day, and if you have any other things that are just your top three no-nos, but Brian Tinker was sharing with me if budget is really an issue in regards to I can't quite go to plywood, but I could go one level up financially over the oriented strand board, which is truly the sponge devil, right? It was CDX plywood.
Hmm.
Um, and again, we know you do a lot of custom homes and higher end stuff, and that's nice. But what do you think about putting CDX into your budget if you can't quite get to plywood, knowing that plywood is not that much more expensive? It's about 20 to 30% over OSB for a house, but that still adds up when you start getting into the 20,000 here, 10,000 here, 5,000 here, 30,000 here in regards to doing things right on a home.
When it comes to looking at, every project has a budget of some kind.
Yeah.
But often what the focus is the building material or the components themselves. I would love for everyone to consider looking at the cost of certain things through a cost per square foot per year thought.
Mm,
Because many of the homes that are being built today and production builders have done us dirty when it comes to appropriately pricing a new construction home. So it's really challenging to be driving down the road seeing something, starting at $500,000 custom new build, production build, but then the real custom builder is telling you, well, it's going to be $1 million. That's really hard to digest.